Good evening, everybody. Welcome. Thank you for joining us. We're going to give a minute and let everybody settle in. And welcome, everyone. So the chat is open, just so you know. You're welcome to connect. I'm sure there's a lot of familiar people here, some that may be friends of ours that know us. Some of you may know each other from the Inflammaging Summit. So go ahead and start connecting if you'd like. There's a Q&A box. A lot of you will be familiar already. Just underneath my chin here, there's a button that says Q&A if you look at the menu, and we will allow time for questions. So don't worry, we made sure that we'll be available for that. But drop your questions there so they don't get lost. Otherwise, it could very easily get lost track of as we're going through the evening. So, hey, how are you doing? You're very welcome. Thank you for joining us. Some familiar faces already. And as people trickle in, the intention tonight is you went to the Inflammaging Summit, you invested your time. It's obviously a concern. Whether you have something that you're dealing with and you needed information, or you're trying to prevent and you're using education to guide you to prevent, it's overwhelming. You go to a summit for 7 days, 40, 50 interviews, somewhere in that range, and everything sounds amazing, because it is. There was all these experts that were curated, that were put together, that all have some incredible insight, that all blew your minds, and all of it sounds so good. And I know, because I've been through this before myself, going to various events, conferences, seminars, summits of this nature. You're like, wow, I found my people, I found my community, I found the answer. But you found a lot of answers. And the challenge we always find, and this is why we did this for you tonight, is where do you start? There's so much going on. Where do you start? And sorry, there's already a couple of questions here. I'll quickly get to these, but we will answer all the questions at the end. I just want to make sure as we're going along, just in case there's anything for the opening, we're talking about Brain Tap that includes pre-conference. So the Brain Tap offer, just for anyone that's not familiar, Brain Tap is a device that uses light and sound to alter brain waves and therefore your mood state and mental health. The Brain Tap offer, there's a couple things there. Yes, we're going to be with them at the Biohacking Conference, a pre-day event. So Biohacking Conference is in Orlando, June 22nd to 24th. There's an entire day that's us and Brain Tap talking about reversing brain and physical health. Aging. The offer from Brain Tap was for their device. So we're not talking about that tonight. If you were part of that webinar, you'll get an email in response with that offer back to you. So just look out for that. There was also an offer for a discount on the Biohacking Conference. You'll also get an email for that. And then there was an offer from us. So tonight we're talking about something entirely different. What we're talking about is we want to support your mission, which was, I just invested 40 hours into this Inflammaging Summit because I know inflammation is a root cause of disease, and the summit probably reinforced that for you even more. What do I do? Where do I start? There was so much. And I know the feeling, that overwhelm of like, wow, it's all so good. This supplement, this therapy, that doctor, everyone had something great to say. And they truly did have something great to say. The challenge becomes, again, where do you start and how do you know what's going to work right for you? And that's a very valid question, because one size fits all. You've all been through this. This is why you're going to attend summits and webinars of this nature, because you've been through being stuck. You've been through going to the clinician and being gaslit, like it's not real. You're overreacting, or the thing that you have doesn't even have a name, right? So you've experienced all this, which is why you're out exploring, finding your own answers. And as you're doing that, there's so much, and you learn that what you hear sounds incredible. Sometimes it doesn't work. Sometimes it makes you feel worse. Sometimes it's too expensive. Sometimes it's like, oh, this is only for women, or this is only for men. What do I have out there that's ideally suited for me? If I could filter through all that noise and really focus on the lowest hanging fruit, the priority, the biggest ROI, that if I could do this one thing, that would be the thing that moves the needle the most for me. And that should be my focus. And then I can start to bring in some of the others, and I'm more in optimization stage as opposed to the bulk, the majority of my problem being eliminated through this one or two big things. And we believe that by accessing your genetic code, you can prioritize what you're able to do. You've been to this Inflammaging Summit, you've learned so many things, you want to start taking action, you understand the value and meaning of not being inflamed. We know that of the 15 top diseases and killers in North America, 14 are rooted in inflammation. 14 of the top killers are all the same thing, inflammation, what you just learned. So if you can eliminate that one thing, 14 things come off the table that you don't have to worry about. It's not possible to have cardiovascular disease, dementia, Alzheimer's, etc., if your cells are thriving and healthy. So what we're going to talk about tonight, and like I said, we'll leave time for Q&A at the end, is what do we know in terms of genetic insights that is potentially your why, the thing that you need to prioritize and focus on. And if you can also know that, then you have a shortcut. You don't need to go through trial and error. You don't need to try all the various things and listen to 40 things and figure out what's actually working and go through the pain and then give up and the struggle and all that stuff you've been through. You can go straight to, here's the exact thing that I needed for me. And now that I'm doing only this, it's immediate ROI. And it makes me feel incredible right away. I'm saving a lot of money. I'm saving a lot of time. I'm back to work. I'm back to my good mood. I'm back to everything, right? So that's what we're going to explore. So first of all, why inflammation? What's going on? The way we look at the body in inflammation is the innate cellular structure. Your cells all have this magnificent thing inside them called the mitochondria, right? And the mitochondria is constantly taking in oxygen and nutrition to create energy. That's the output. In that process of using oxygen as fuel, you have a byproduct that's called an oxidant, which is a free radical, a toxin that you actually make in this process. And now this is one. I'm going to give you several examples to show you may fit in one of many buckets. So if you are that person that genetically does not support this process well, there's a gene called SOD2, SOD2, superoxide dismutase, that determines how well you deal with the oxidation, how healthy is the mitochondria, how well does the mitochondria thrive inside your body, in your cells. You may not be doing so well there. In fact, variability in this particular gene can be from 100% activity to 60% activity to 30% activity. So if you're at that person that's minus 70%, you're only active at the 30% level, well, you can imagine going out and doing the regular everyday activity without 70% of your capacity to deal with the oxidative stress that you're putting your body into. There's your root cause of inflammation. There's that one thing that if I could identify, that's the one job that my body doesn't do well. And if I were just to support that, I would eliminate most of this inflammation I'm dealing with, right? SOD2, SOD2, I'll type it in here. Now, it doesn't end with SOD2 because there's a cofactor to SOD2 called GPX, which is your hydrogen peroxide synthesis. And it's kind of a cascade. And this is why it's very important. And most of you here probably already know the difference between genetics and functional genomics. Sorry, I just realized I'm not typing that to everyone here, so I'll do that. SOD2 and GPX. There you go. So yeah, so now it's more functional genomics is more of a cascade. We don't look at things separately or individually. SOD2 is here, this gene is here, because the body doesn't work like that. The body isn't a bunch of independent jobs and processes. There's systems, there's baton passes, job done, pass it on, job done, pass it on. And if one particular cog in that wheel or link in that chain is off, then the entire chain doesn't give you the benefit it's meant to, right? The entire system fails. Even though this seemingly is doing well, you got the best SOD2, but if you don't have the good GPX, then the system itself, the net outcome of the system is failing. That's why you need to understand how to interpret functionally, which is what we do. So the mitochondrial pathway, SOD2 and GPX, you have to be able to deal with oxidation, which is a main driver of inflammation in the cell. You have to be able to deal with hydrogen peroxide synthesis, which is another main driver or protector of inflammation at the cell. That could be the one thing that if you were to do and focus on, that could add years to your life, or if you do not focus on, could add inflammation to your life based on your habits. And now if you know that here's my thing, you now very specifically know which supplement to take, which exercise to do, which lifestyle habits, for example, sauna, walking, sleeping, what are the right habits you need to focus on for that one problem as an isolated red flag and focus for you, right? So now let's park that for a second. That's an example of one thing that if you were to figure it out and do it, might be your secret to unlocking no inflammation. Second, we just spoke of toxins that are being made from the inside through your cells. We also make them from our hormones. And this is why when it comes to inflammation, women fare so much worse than men. It's unfortunate that diseases like, for example, dementia and Alzheimer's, 80% of those cases are in women. Sorry, to answer your question, Graziella, SOD2 is in the middle, which means about minus 40% capacity, which means it should be a focus and priority. That is a sort of red flag in your genome, right? It's not quite TT, which is the worst, but CT means minus 40%, to answer your question. So when it comes to female hormone health specifically, but we'll also talk about male hormone health. When it comes to your estrogen metabolic pathway, it's not just estrogen. It's not that simple. It's progesterone, converts to testosterone, converts to estrogen. So there's a bit of a flow. And then the path that you do that at has genes at each step that determine how quickly you turn these valves on and off, how much you open the valves, let's say. So to what degree do you make these different hormones? And it's highly variable for different people. Some women just make a lot more estrogen. So you're triggering estrogenic traits like your body type, your hair, your skin, your mood, etc. But some women also convert that estrogen into a toxic metabolite. The metabolite that you clear in your menstrual cycle before, I should say after making the estrogen and before the menstrual cycle, there's this conversion. And there's genes that predict what you make. There's genes that are very black and white and clear, not only what you make, but to what degree do you make them. Here's 3 potential buckets. I could go down the 2-hydroxy pathway, the 4-hydroxy pathway, or the 16-hydroxy pathway. Those are the 3 pipes that are open for me. We know genetically which pipe is open and how big the pipe is. Now, all of a sudden, it's very easy to predict. I'm a woman that's estrogen dominant, and I also have a very big and heavy 4-hydroxy pipe that's all going down there. And this is a potent toxin. This is the thing that I eat everything right. I exercise right. I'm very careful with my environment. Why do I have inflammation? Why are these diseases being triggered? Why do women get more dementia than men? Why are women less likely to survive a heart attack than men? 66% of women will die on their first cardiovascular event without any previous warning sign or symptom. They didn't even know they were sick. For men, it's a tiny fraction. You're much more likely to recover because of this cofactor of an internal inflammatory drip. And you learn how important inflammation is as a focus and priority, but what's causing it? The answer is not the same for all of us. So this is another why. Now, for men, when it comes to the androgen pathway, testosterone, some of us make a clean androgen. So there's genes that determine, again, progesterone becomes testosterone, becomes estrogen. Same exact pathway. Men just have a daily cycle as opposed to a monthly cycle like women do. In that pathway, some men metabolize their testosterone into what's called dihydrotestosterone, DHT. It's a potent version of testosterone, that manly man version. When you see an NBA player that's moving around, you see every little ripped, striated fiber of their muscle in their shoulder, and they don't have a drip of fat on them. That's DHT, right? That Superman testosterone. It's also a potent toxin. And most of us, our lifestyle is not aligned to having a surge of dihydrotestosterone on a daily basis. We're sitting and working on laptops. We're not moving that much. We're not lifting heavy rocks and throwing them around, which is what we're powered to do and why we were given this gift. We're not using it. Our lifestyles are very different. And so you don't use it, it starts to cause inflammation. And this is why there's so much more prostate inflammation and prostate enlargement and prostate cancer. This is why there's so much more hair loss and follicle death with men. So all of a sudden, there's one thing could be your why. That's the thing that is triggering your inflammation. And if you focus on something else, you're not solving your problem. So understand that inflammation is not a singular source. It's not go eat this or go take this supplement, right? You might get lucky and it'll work for you. You might land on the right thing in your first try. It may take 6 or 7 tries. And what I can tell you is all the experts you heard from with full integrity are correct about what they said. In their experience, this thing changed their life. They happen to find the thing that worked for them. But ask them what the path looked like to get there. All of them will have stories of the 4, 5, 6, 7 years of struggle until they landed on that one aha moment. That was like, wow, this thing is so amazing and finally moved the needle for me that I need to tell everybody. And a lot of them have built businesses out of it. And a lot of them have websites and books and etc. It worked for them because their genetic red flag was leading to the problem that was the exact solution they needed. But they probably didn't find it on day one. And that's where I'm suggesting that you should realign your anticipation and expectations, that you either personalize to get to the right answer on day one, or expect that out of these 40, 50 interviews you watched, you might have to juggle through and filter through a bunch of the noise to finally find the thing that actually is your problem. That's why there was 40 or 50 interviews on inflammation, because there's so many different ways to look at it, so many different inputs, so many different problems. It's not one thing. The outcome is the same thing. The cell is now inflamed, which allows it to be expressing disease. Now, which disease is based on which hardware is failing. But in terms of why you inflame the root, the variability is, based on your genetic code. So let's look at another reason. Then we're going to start talking about some diseases and conditions and outcomes and why those happen. So your glutathione pathway, we are told, if you have heavy metals or chemicals or mold toxicity, mycotoxins, often you'll go to a naturopathic doctor and you'll be told, take some glutathione, take something to help you bind toxins. For heavy metals, you'll be told to go chelate and go through chelation. But when most other forms of toxins, it's like you need more glutathione. So there's a singular gene called GSTT1 that determines how well you deal with glutathione and instructed, truly instructed. Remember, genes are instructions. So genes are this book of codes. Each gene is one of the lines of code that instructs a separate process. So every cellular process in your body has an instruction that's genetically coded. And if you learn how to read that code, you understand how your body does that job. That's what we're saying. So same thing with glutathione. The GSTT1 gene will tell you how efficiently your body uses glutathione. And what is the converse of efficient? It's not inefficient. What it is that your body or your glutathione stores cannot discriminate between toxins that are dangerous and the minerals and nutrients that your body actually needs, because it's not being instructed properly. It's like the difference between go shovel the snow in the driveway or just go out with a shovel and start shoveling, right? You don't know where to stop. There's no parameters or criteria, just go do it. So if you don't have the GSTT1 gene, which by the way, there's a really unique phenomenon here called a copy number variation. It doesn't happen in many genes. So if you see Graziella's comment about CT, right? So on the SOD2 gene, at some location on that gene, we have found that there's sometimes a spelling mistake. And that's called a SNP. And when you have a SNP, it alters the function of that gene because the code is now misspelled. When you're reading a book and a word is spelled wrong, your versus your. I just said the same word twice, but we know there's very different ways of spelling your. Two different meanings, right? Same thing happens in a SNP. The code is then interpreted differently by your body. That's call it the most common type of variation. There's also something called a copy number variation. How many copies of the gene do you have? So as opposed to looking for an error within the gene, do you even have the gene? Is it entirely missing? Or do you have an extra copy of this gene? And in this gene, the implication is if I don't have it, 0, GSTT1, which is possible, then your body doesn't instruct the utilization of glutathione at all. And so you put it in, but it doesn't work. And so you have to have very specific supplements that you would take instead that are more precursors that get to work, or you have to work with somebody that understands your genetic code to help you build up. And just like going to the gym and train, allowing your body to build up to the point where it knows how to utilize it. So starting slow and building up, and a certain protocol to get you there. Then we think, okay, GSTT1, we now understand that. I now have to understand that in my blood, there's this traffic cop that's going and looking for the nonsense, all the toxins, and it's trying to grab them, and in simplest terms I can use, send them to the liver to clear and metabolize and get rid of them, pee them out and poop them out, so that my body is void of these toxins that cause inflammation. We are already designed to detox. So we are designed to walk around on this planet and be exposed to toxins and eliminate them. We are not, however, designed for today's context, where the proliferation and volume of toxins is far beyond what our ancestors were exposed to. And so our genetic code hasn't yet caught up, and our capacity hasn't caught up, right? So that's where we have this change between toxin and clearance, and all of a sudden toxin, but clearance hasn't changed. So you can't keep up, and that's another source of inflammation. So GSTT1 is that gene that goes out and looks for these toxins in your blood, sends in the liver to clear and get rid of. And if you have the not so good version, or if you're missing one copy or two copies, you don't do this job so well or at all. Or you may have an extra copy, which means you do this job really well, which may explain why, mom says that I can't handle the smell, I can't handle this chemical, and mom's sister says, I don't know what you're talking about. It's fine. Like, you're just annoying. You're picky, right? Because their genetic capacity to deal with that smell or that chemical is different. So GSTT1, you can see how clearly that would point to why your body would have inflammation. That's one particular job that could fail, finding these toxins to eliminate. Now, before the toxins enter your body, they have to get by a first line of defense. And there's two of them, two primary. One that we speak of less is your skin, right? But the majority are things that you breathe, inhalation-based toxins, and things that you eat, right? So consumption of food. In those two, again, there's genes we look at, GSTP1, which instructs this primary first line of defense of airborne or inhalation-based toxins, and a lot of us aren't doing so well there. So if you have a combination of my GSTP1 is suboptimal, plus my GSTT1 is off, well, then all of a sudden you might be that person that when you walk into that factory and smell that chemical, or you smell that perfume in the perfume section, or you walk to a house with mold, you're hypersensitive to it. You're the person that says, oh, I can't be in this basement. Let's get out of here, right? And whereas your friends and your family, like, there's no problem. Why are you so sensitive? Well, because your genes have designed you to be sensitive and not be able to clear that stuff. Same thing is true of your gut. The GSTM1 gene also has the potential of having a copy number variation, meaning how many copies of this gene do I have? Me, yours truly, has 0. So one of the root causes of my chronic conditions that I no longer have was that I was eating foods that were seemingly healthy, but I have to be extra diligent in knowing what toxins are coming along with that food. So it's not just the food or the ingredients, but it's also the processing chemicals. It's also the packaging. Everything, that every molecule that's entering my gut, I have 0 ability to detoxify. So if these are a toxic threat and I have no frontline defense, there's no soldiers waiting to protect me, the walls come tumbling down. Everything is a threat. And that's what leads to gut dysbiosis and leaky gut and eventually leaky brain. And I've actually done a live a live blood cell analysis, right? A microanalysis. And I could see proteins in my blood, which don't make sense because they don't enter your bloodstream. It's because my gut was leaky, and these undigested foods were going directly through my gut wall, this dysbiotic permeable wall, and entering my bloodstream, right? So then all of a sudden, the proof was in the pudding there that inability to detoxify there was leading to inflammation, gut dysbiosis. I would have had things like Crohn's, colitis, IBS. They were around the corner if I didn't know, and a few more years of this had gone by, right? And I would have had an inflammation-based condition, and I wouldn't have known why. So now I painted a picture for you, and there's more, right? I painted a picture for you of some of the bigger reasons that our cells cannot protect themselves. Some of the bigger reasons why our food and our environment is a threat. And a lot of you will fit into one of these stories, right? A lot of you who are either trying to prevent or reverse an inflammatory condition, one of the things I said is your story, which means the solution can be highly personalized. It can be precise. It can be impactful on day one. It can be exactly what you need on day one if you identify which bucket you fit. And there's other buckets to speak of, by the way. I'm speaking about some of the bigger ones. But if you don't fit in one of these, there may be something else that is the root cause of your inflammation and your cells not thriving. So why then does that lead to disease? Well, it's a bit of a genetic lottery to play to understand your hardware. So we now understood the inputs. Sorry, Caroline's asking, so in my genes, it makes me sensitive to smell, sound, light, no autoimmune disorder. So Caroline's saying it's my genes that make me sensitive to smells, sounds, and lights, right? I have autoimmune disorder. I'm also working to reverse. So let me tell you something else. The GSTM1 gene that I'm missing, the gut detox gene, some people have both copies. They're doing really well there. They have the full set of detox genes for the gut, what they're supposed to have. Now, you've inherited that trait from your ancestors for whom their toxic threat in the food that they ate was highly reduced from today's reality. So a full set of gut detox genes was meant in the context of a time when food wasn't a threat. And so when you put this in today's context and you are a good hyper gut detoxer, but the threat is so constant, it's chronic in nature. Everything I eat has chemicals, drying agents, glyphosates, pesticides, plastics, etc. It leads to autoimmunity because your body is constantly fighting back because you're constantly fueling that fire. So this good gut detox, ultimately in today's context, yes, I'm not suffering from inflammation, but I'm now suffering from autoimmunity because I'm fueling my body's desire to fight. And I'm such a good fighter because I have both copies of that gene. And that's one of the root causes of autoimmunity that we find. There's others also. But yes, when it comes to sensitivity to smells, what we just described as one of them, sounds and lights is likely a byproduct. So if you're in an inflamed state, right, and your methylation, which we haven't even talked about yet. So methylation is the system where we talked about your mitochondria, we talked about your hormone toxins, we talked about inhalation and food-based toxins. So what are all the things that cause the inflammation? Once you've suffered the inflammation, methylation is now meant to come throw buckets of water on the inflammation to put the fire out. And some of us aren't doing well there. And so all of a sudden, the glutathione and the gut detox and the liver support, you're doing it all, but you still are inflamed, right? You go to the naturopathic doctor or somebody who can do functional lab testing, and they tell you, you don't have toxins in your blood. You do, but it's not a major concern. It's not a red flag. It's like a 3 out of 10 right now. So why then? Where's this coming from? What's the inflammation? Well, if you can't fight the inflammation, then all of a sudden you're inflamed from a much lesser degree of inflammatory threat. And so all the measures that are conventional go out the window. Whatever is measured typically or interpreted, I should say, however those numbers are interpreted, are not relevant to you anymore because your methylation is off. So there's a very different problem to solve. Your problem isn't what do I avoid and how do I supplement glutathione and antioxidation, although it's not a bad idea to do those things. Your priority, the very first thing we talked about, what's my why? What do I prioritize? What's that one thing that if I focus on, I'm going to feel way better. I'm going to feel amazing. And it usually has to do with one system. And in your case, might be the methylation. It might be that it's not a toxic problem. It's a fighting the inflammation problem. And so a little trigger gives you a major outcome. And nothing adds up. Nobody can figure it out. And that's why you're stuck. So in that methylation cascade, there's simple fixes. We can go straight into methylation and figure out, does this person need more B12? That may be the one thing. And then we can get even more precise. We can say, do they need adenosine B12 or do they need methylcobalamin B12? With that level of specificity, because we know what genes metabolize those things and what version you have. Do they need to swallow their B12 and put it into their gut? Or do they need to take it sublingually under the tongue? We also know that because the genes that determine those jobs very clear. Does this person need folate? Anytime there's a methylation issue in functional medicine, the first answer is give this person some folate. They need a methylated vitamin. If you do really well with MTHFR and SHMT1, a couple of genes in that cascade, you're going to get over methylated and you're going to get headaches and you're going to get flushes and you're going to feel gross. And then you're going to probably get a higher dose. Your clinician is saying, oh, I didn't give you enough. We need more. This isn't working. We need to give you more. And it's actually the opposite. That's the truth, is that you were given something that you didn't even need, right? So the response is, oh, you're inflamed. Your levels are okay. Maybe it's your methylation. Let's give you some methyl support. If you don't look at the genes first to understand what specific methyl support do I need? Do I need the methylfolate, which is what's typically given to everybody? Or do I need folinic acid? A very different way to deal with it. Folinic, right? So all of a sudden, you can be very specific. So Graziella says she signed up with a coach, and somebody talked about glutathione. So I'll answer those two questions. So yeah, signing up with a coach allows, so the reports are designed for you to go through and understand all of what we're talking about tonight, right? They're spelled out in a way, and anyone like Graziella that has her reports, like, look, we're talking here tonight, and right away she goes to report, looks up SAW2 and says, what does CT mean? So they're very easy to use. They're very sort of user-friendly in terms of the consumer side, which is very important to us because most of these genetic reports are not designed for you. They're designed for geneticists, but it's not geneticists who's using them. It's you and your functional medicine doctor, and neither one has been trained, right? So now all of a sudden we have to be careful on how we present the information, which is what we do. So now, I'm sure you can hear that cat meowing. I should probably let it out. 1 second. Give me 1 second. Sorry, guys, that was a surprise appearance by a new cat that's still too young to understand what kind of meowing is appropriate or not. So, so where we left off was, so now in methylation, that may be the one thing, right? That may be the one thing where now to answer your question, Marty, about glutathione, what do you take instead? So we make a product called Detox Optimizer. You don't need to use that. You can use whatever you like. But the reason I bring it up is because if you go to our website and look at the label, you can see what's in it. The precursors, NAC, selenium, alpha lipoic acid, milk thistle. And you might already have these in your cabinet, so just start using them, right? Or you may have somebody local that you like to work with, so get those. Or you can go get it from our website. We have the cocktail with the right sort of proportions ready to go. So now, yes, I know there's more questions, but we'll make sure that we leave room for questions. I'll finish what I was saying about the next step, which is now we've understood all of these input problems, mitochondria, hormones, detox, airborne, food-based. Second layer, how well does my body fight all of these fires that I've created? Methylation. I can get very specific. B9, B12, sublingual, swallow it, adenosyl, methylcobalamin, folate, folinic acid. I can do exactly what my body needs me to do so that I feel the way I need to feel, right? Fight this thing at the specific place where it's coming from, not some other place which may give me a 10% benefit when I could have gotten 90 with the same amount of effort and same amount of outlay of cash for whatever I'm doing, supplements, etc. So now after all that, a disease needs to be triggered. So how does that happen? Well, there's a bit of a genetic lottery that gets played in terms of what hardware is failing. So everything we just talked about was more input. Now, what fails first? Why did I say that 14 of the 15 top killers are rooted in inflammation and not everybody has all 14 of them? Because we don't know innately which hardware of yours is designed to fail first. There are certain areas where we can predict this and certain areas where we can't. So when we look at your cardiovascular health, for example, we've mapped this out really well. We really understand who's at greater risk now that we know the toxins are coming in. Here's your genetic suboptimality. You don't do a good job of ABC, whatever that is. Your methylation isn't off, or it is off, so you're not fighting it well. Why did that lead to cardiovascular disease? Well, why are diseases rooted in inflammation? Because when the cellular structure of your arterial system is exposed to these toxins that are in your blood now because of all of what we spoke about earlier, the result is inflammation. You're triggering inflammation by a constant flow of toxic insult that this cellular structure, this artery, was not designed for. Your lungs and your gut were designed as filters. That's why we talk about very specific genes, the glutathione genes that are meant to protect them. Some of us aren't doing as well as others, but end of the day, these were designed as filters. Your arteries were never designed for that because our ancestors didn't have those exposures, right? We've seen in the last 50 or so years an introduction of an additional 144,000 toxins that didn't exist. The average human walks around with 700 toxins in them that they don't even know that they have. And on top of that, there's EMF. There's a whole other layer of toxin that we didn't have to think about before. It's a constant drip with your phone and with your Wi-Fi and with your TV. Like everything is constantly dripping at you with another toxin. There's stress, the way we work. There's anxiety from the current reality of this planet we live on, geopolitical and all of what's driving our mental health issues. So in a short, the context is very different. The threat level is higher than it's ever been. And our understanding of what we need to do to not be inflamed is completely different now. It's very, very different than mom's reality and grandma's reality. It's a different world. And so in order to not be suffering from inflammaging, right, you have to have very different habits than what you remember watching on TV even 10 years ago. It's a very different world now. So the diseases that get triggered, cardiovascular is one example. We can determine genetically what quality of hardware you have, and if this is going to be the first thing to fail. And not only are you supporting the glutathione, or not only are you supporting the methylation, but you're also supporting this. So the actual site, the location of the disease is also supported. We know there's certain supplements that can make this better. We know there's certain habits that can make this better, right? So now all of a sudden, let's deal with it from every front. So every angle is covered and that thing does not manifest. Why do some people get Alzheimer's and dementia instead of cardiovascular disease? Well, ultimately, from these multiple inputs, whether it's breathing, eating, insulin response, stressors, whatever, all these various things that lead to dementia, ultimately brain cells die and amyloid plaque is developed. These are the two things that equal cognitive decline. Right? And also mitochondrial decline, which happens a lot in the brain because there's a high density of mitochondria in brain cells. So if that's the case, again, what's triggering that amyloid plaque? And the hardware component is the ApoE3 gene. So ApoE3 or 4 or 2, depending what version you have, we now know how efficiently your body deals with lipids and what the likelihood is of developing the amyloid plaque. So if you are that person that has the input of the gut or the input of the airborne or whatever, and you have the poor methylation, so there's inflammation, right? Why then Alzheimer's first before something else? Because your body doesn't deal with amyloid plaque well. It doesn't deal with cholesterol and lipid transport well. And so you will get that buildup quicker than somebody else. And the numbers are, on terms of risk numbers, it's 8 to 10 times likelihood of developing Alzheimer's and dementia than the average person. That's where genetics used to end. Now that we have functional insights, we know that's just the beginning. Okay, somebody has an 8 to 10 times elevated risk. Let's bring that down to 0. How about we bring that to 0? Why? Because all we've determined is that due to this gene, they don't deal with lipid transport well, so they will develop amyloid plaque, but something has to trigger the inflammation first, or the body won't do that. The body doesn't, the cholesterol is a hormone that your body is using to reduce inflammation. That's why it is sent to the heart, to the arteries, to the brain, to reduce inflammation. It's when it meets toxicity that it oxidizes and gets deposited and makes you sick, right? So now all of a sudden you have this triangulation of, here's the thing that is my why. I either allow airborne toxins in, food-based toxins, I make toxins for my hormones or my mitochondria. That's one point of the triangle. Second point is, here's my methylation. Here's the thing that doesn't allow me to put this fire out. So we can now start to turn dials, and whether this is high, this is high, this is low, you start to know where to prioritize. What's the thing for me that's the number one thing I should work on first will give me the biggest ROI. And the third point of this triangulation around your genetic code is the hardware problem. Which hardware is failing for me? Is it cardiovascular? Is it brain? Is it breast in terms of breast cancer? Is it gut related? We understand how well your gut makes enzymes and why your gut might be dysbiotic. And we can, is it your hypertension and blood pressure flow? There's genes around that. So we can start to understand what may trigger. And this triangulation is now your personalized plan. Here's the exact thing that I need to do. Forget about all the noise, right? Forget about everything I've heard and learned. Here's the exact instruction that I'm receiving from my genetic code telling me if you adopt habits around this threat, you're not getting sick. If you adopt habits that are not aligned to this threat and you ignore all this, you probably will get sick. And you now have a personalized roadmap, which then allows you to go back to those 40, 45, 50 interviews that you just went through and know exactly what to focus on. You were recommended a lot of really great stuff. You learned a lot of amazing things, but where do you start? What's the right one for you? That's where, again, understanding your genetic code allows you to prioritize and pick the right thing first, the thing that you need, your red flag, your why. And that's why there was so much information, because there's so many reasons, there's so many whys, there's so many paths to inflammation and inflammaging, right? So we can turn those things down. So now with that, we have some time left, and there's 4 questions in the chat right now in the Q&A box. I'm going to go to those. And then if there are any other questions, put them into the Q&A and we'll get to them. So, and it says, do you recommend supplements diet? Yeah, so in the reports, we break it up by problem. So we don't say, here's your genes, here's your recommendations. We say, here's anxiety. Now, if that's the problem you're trying to solve, based on your genetic code, here's what we recommend. Because we also understand people need to prioritize. You can't be overwhelmed and do everything. We also don't know, based on your context, which problem has manifested, right? We know what your risks are and what your propensity is, but we don't know what you've been doing. So we don't know if you've already been doing everything right that's perfectly in line to your genes, and anxiety doesn't happen to be a problem. So the way it's laid out is you can look it up by system, sleep, cardiovascular, diet, nutrition, hormones, immunity and cellular health, and I'm missing something here. Missing fitness, right? Fitness and longevity. So you can look up in these different buckets and go find the problem you're trying to solve. And within that problem, your genetic code is going to recommend, yes, supplements, diet, lifestyle, environment, habits to remove, habits to add. Can you explain a little bit more what we will get in the DNA code report recommend? So we kind of went through that. So you're going to get 7 systems, which I just said: sleep, chronic disease like cardiovascular, etc., what we've been talking about, inflammation and immunity, so innate cellular health, all of what we talked about in the beginning here, hormones, everything about hormones, so important for female health, mood and behavior, everything about the brain and how your brain works, why you use words like depression, anxiety, burnout, and why you don't have to, if you understood why you were wired and what you were designed for and you started going and doing that, right? Longevity, how do I add 10 years to my life? How do I take everything that I do every day, every choice that I make, from my fitness to my food to my in relationships, and add 10 healthy years to my life? And then there's sleep, right? So amongst these 7 buckets, it's structured that way, and you can look up micro problems within them. For example, how well do I metabolize fats under the diet section? So I now know, should I be on a keto diet or not? How well do I metabolize starches? What's my insulin response look like? So do I know what my proportion of my plates should be in terms of carbs, meats, etc., right? So next question here. Hoping you'll address genetics associated with LPA. We mitigate in advance of age. Okay, so we're going to get into that. And you have another question about self-decode and 23andMe for genetic testing. I just want to read both your questions. Sorry, I paid both self-decode and 23andMe for genetic testing. Okay, so let me get to that first, because that's a question for everybody. So when it comes to 23andMe and self-decode, I would say of the genetic tests that are out there, self-decode, when I say genetics, I mean this gene means this gene means that, right? As opposed to functional genomics. You've been hearing us speak in terms of cascades, etc., right? So when it comes to genetic tests, I would say self-decode is probably doing the best job out there. They have a really great algorithm. It's more polygenomic, so multiple factors considered. It's still genetics. It's still, here's your gene, right, etc. We aren't able to use their data sets because if you recall earlier, we were talking about copy number variations, right? In some of the most important genes, especially when it comes to inflammation, cellular health, We're looking for copy number variations. How many copies of the gene do you have? Genetic tests typically don't look for that. They're looking for a bunch of SNPs, right? Those spelling mistakes in genes. And so we have tried, we would love to be able to use 23andMe data because there's, I think, 30 million people out there sitting with 23andMe tests that haven't changed their health, that need someone like us to guide them through that journey. So we can't because they don't test for what we test for. So we test for a lot less, but we go deeper and have more sophisticated analysis on what we test for. So we're looking for what matters as opposed to collecting a bunch of data to sell to data mining companies. That's not what we do. And in terms of lipoproteins, yeah, I would say that in terms of mitigating with age, if you're dealing with, say, like cholesterolemia, let's use that as an example. You ultimately, it's the same story. You have to deal with the inflammatory insult of the 9p21, right? Which means first we have to investigate genetically what the quality of your endothelium is, this inner lining of the blood vessel, and we can determine that with 9p21. It's something that we look at in our genetic report. Based on that, we know exactly what recommendations to make, right? We've taken people off of things like Lipitor, off of cholesterol pills. So all of that, all of these markers that are pointing to inflammation in the arterial system are rooted in endothelial inflammation, inner lining. It's a single cell membrane. That's where we can highly focus on why that's happening to you and then what to recommend. And that's one of the easier things to understand. So there's some more complex things like Lyme disease and breast cancer, where we say you have to work with a coach. This is something that's spelled out in the report that you can manage on your own. It's a very easy thing to deal with. Okay, so there's more questions. Why can't I see the questions? If you go to the open section in the Q&A, it will show you what questions are actually open. And then as they're answered, they go into the answered section. So, and I'm doing that with yours right now. Ingrid has 0 GSTM1. So your priority, that means that whatever goes into your gut is potentially a toxic threat. And the thing from my personal experience that you need to learn is to not just rely on ingredient labels, but to understand processing. Because keep in mind that according to the FDA and Health Canada, a chemical that is added to your food during processing is not an ingredient. Even though you're consuming it, it's not part of the recipe, right? It's something that was added to get it into your package, to change, to cause the ability of things to bind, to make it last longer, to make it not ripen so that it gets to the store and it's ripe at the right time. So these chemicals that are processing chemicals are not considered ingredients. The biggest bang for your buck would be two things: to support your gut with the right detox supplements, so constant everyday support. You can, again, go look at the detox optimizer on our website, look at the label. You can either take that or find whatever you have in your cabinet that has some of those ingredients in it. But the bigger dial to turn is to look at which foods that are being processed may potentially come along with a threat that you didn't recognize or understand because they were processing threats. So let me give you a simple example. Chickpeas, for example, are dried before they're shipped. And there's a chemical that's used to dry them, which is a potent neurotoxin. And when you have a GSTM1 0, you're going to eat hummus, which seems like a health food, right? It's healthy. And you're going to get bloated and you're going to get a migraine because your gut has zero ability to prevent that neurotoxin from entering the bloodstream. And now start doing that every day. I love hummus, it's healthy. Well, then you're going to start to feel chronic conditions like dysbiotic gut, IBS, Crohn's, colitis, these types of things will start, right? So your priority is to understand food processing and eliminate all the bad news. As close as you can get to farm to fork, the better off you're going to be, right? Plucked out of the ground, shot with a gun, that fresh and not processed, but also supplement to protect your gut. Now there's some questions in the chat. Gut. So I can work on my gut-brain connection. but trying to work on all the pillars of health, my diet, how I eat. Yeah, exactly. So the way Caroline just described her plan is the way you need to think, which is you don't silo or separate problems that you're experiencing. They're all interconnected and related. So you cannot have a healthy brain if you don't have a healthy gut, right? If you have leaky gut and you're not careful about what you're eating, then you're constantly putting inflammatory insults into the blood, which can cross the blood-brain barrier, enter the blood, and cause neural inflammation, which then leads to depression and anxiety. The brain can't function because of the toxic load, the inflammatory load that you're causing. And this is why we said in the very beginning, inflammation isn't a single process. There isn't one switch that you flip on that equals it. We have different whys. We have different paths to getting to it. And this could be somebody's why. Going back to that last question about GSTM1, that could be your why, that I have depression, right? And I need to take a depression pill, or I am suffering from inflammation in my brain because of a root cause of inflammation in my gut, because I'm missing a gene that causes me to not detoxify foods, and I'm missing another gene that doesn't allow me to make enzymes to break down certain foods, and I had the wrong habits. Now, if I knew on day one what I was missing, I would have had the right habits. And the inflammation of the gut wouldn't happen, and the inflammation of the brain wouldn't happen, and the thing that we call depression, which required a prescription, was not possible to settle in. This is why we say all diseases are rooted in inflammation. So another question here. So in terms of peptides, not the effectiveness, but the need. What should you focus on? There's a lot of great peptides out there, and for the most part, they do their job, right? So peptides are potent. Let's just say that they're somewhere in between a supplement and a drug. So they're potent and they're effective for the most part. So all we would do is prioritize what to focus on. So you're probably hearing great news. You might listen to a Ben Greenfield podcast about peptides and say, wow, this sounds incredible. But before go spending the money, figure out where your body actually needs support. Right? And so what do you actually need to support? What system, which biological system is failing? Not what symptom do I feel? Not I have headaches, which peptide do I take? It's I have leaky gut, which is leading to migraines. How do I support that? Right? Root cause, which solves, and the good thing about solving root cause is you end up solving multiple problems. Because when you have a failing system, it doesn't typically equal one problem, it equals multiple. They just settle in over time. So there's a chronological, ladder you crawl where every little few months or a few years, depending how quickly it's progressing, something new turns up and something new turns up. That's why I had 5 chronic conditions that all were developed within a period of a year. And I'd never been sick before that in my life because my habits all of a sudden were misaligned to my genetic code. And same thing with probiotics. Well, we can tell you if that's no, everybody, again, probiotics, prebiotics, it's not like no, you shouldn't be doing them. Everybody should, but is it a priority? If it's a budget question, I have to pick this or that, or if it's more of a habit question, I'm not going to do everything, I'm overwhelmed. Is this the priority? And for some people it is. For some people, that's the one thing that would really drive the needle for them, right? For some people, not so much. It's not the number one thing. For some people, it might be hormones. Focus on your hormones and 80% of your problem is gone. Once you're there, then let's start adding the probiotics and optimizing things, right? So there's the acute response, let me deal with my problem, and then there's sort of the added layers of optimization. Graziella is asking about England. Yeah, we have plenty of clients in England, and we're actually going to be there, by the way, at the Health Optimization Summit, which I think is in mid-June. So if you're in town, we'll see you there. Lara's question, how about circadian rhythm? Trying to get up early before I develop leaky gut. I could wake up to exercise before sunrise, not now. Yes, so that's a big question. We do have the answer. This is where I would recommend you work with one of our coaches because there's some nuances there. It's not a single answer. There's multiple things happening here. What's happening? First of all, there are genes around your circadian rhythm. Very clear. There's actually a gene called clock, which regulates your internal clock. There's also a gene called BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor, which regulates your brain's ability to develop BDNF and neuroplasticity and new synapses that you flow information through. Between these two, they manage your internal clock. So that's one. Let's park that for a second. Then there's your serotonin response. So you said that I now have leaky gut, which means your gut's in a dysbiotic state. You make your serotonin in your gut, right? And you make it in your sleep. So if your circadian rhythm is broken and you're not sleeping properly and you have a leaky gut, so the environment is not proper and your serotonin response is off, which we can determine genetically, then yeah, all of this could very easily happen, right? It just all of a sudden it doesn't work anymore. The timing, the scheduling, all this stuff doesn't work. And it's not a single, again, this is why we have to think functionally. It's not genetics, this gene equals the problem. No, it's multiple things that when you added them together, plus your habits equaled the way you now feel. This is the type of thing we unravel and unpack all the time, right? It's serotonin, BDNF, clock, and gut, but you can't deal with any one of them. You have to deal with all of them. And then this holistic approach will get the system firing properly, and this feeling that you have cannot settle in anymore. So NRF2 supplements good for BDNF. I'm not familiar. I'm going to look it up while we chat right now. What we use for BDNF, let me just look up NRF2. F2. We use whole fruit coffee extract. It's a supplement that comes from the coffee fruit. It's not caffeine or coffee. It's from the coffee fruit. Give me a second. I'm just going to plug in my laptop here. Make sure I stay with you. So that's what we use because it's a potent upregulator of BDNF. So NRF2 is, one second here, regulator of cellular resistance to oxidants. So what it will do, it sounds like a powerful regulator of oxidation in the blood. And keep in mind that your brain has an extreme high density of mitochondria. So oxidation will affect brain function and cognition because it's going to cause a load to the mitochondria that you may not be able to manage. So to answer your question, it's not that it's good for BDNF. It's that it's good to remove an oxidative load from the brain where your mitochondria is in high density, which then allows your brain to flourish and function the way it's supposed to, which means BDNF levels may be optimal at that point. But we do first have to look at the BDNF gene to determine your innate capacity to regulate BDNF levels. And we might have to add habits into your day like sauna or stretching or yoga and at very specific times of the day. So we can get very specific on what to do there to upregulate BDNF. So Doug is saying vitamins good for bad, vitamins, sorry, good plus bad, brands, big box, local drugstore, doctor's brand. What am I to do to get good vitamins? So you're right on, so a lot of brands use filler, a lot of brands use commodity type cheap ingredients. A lot of ingredients, there's a scale just like there is to food and everything else. There's a name, but that name of an ingredient doesn't guarantee you the quality. So I would filter it down to the brands that functional medicine doctors use. They've done years and years and years of vetting, and nobody enters that community unless they're producing the right stuff. So brands like Designs for Health, AOR, Thorn. I mean, we make a brand called Nutrients, which is all high quality, super potent ingredients. It's on our website. So I would stick to the functional medicine brands and perhaps don't just pull something off the shelf. And the good news is these brands weren't available to the public before, but now they are. They used to be what are called professional brands that had to be bought through a functional medicine practitioner, but now they've opened up to the public, so it's possible for you to get them. So that's what I would do is look up, call a functional medicine practitioner, call us, but those are the big ones: Designs for Health, AOR, Thorn. I'm missing a couple. There's Cellcore around the gut. Our brand, and then there's, it's just dropped in the chat there. So if you go to the link there, you'll see what we make. So now what's unique about what we do, keep in mind that everything we're talking about here today is system-based, right? Meaning that most supplements even are designed around the symptom, right? I have a headache. I have whatever, and here's the thing for it. Now, the functional formulas are a little bit better. They do understand root cause medicine, but our supplements are designed around genetic expression management, very, very specific. We know that a woman that is estrogen dominant, it's because the CYP19A1 gene is converting her testosterone into estrogen. There's no guesswork there. We've done the genetic research and we know we need to slow that gene down. So when we deal with estrogen dominance, it's not about the symptom. We're actually adding ingredients that slow down the gene expression. Or perhaps there's a woman that's having a fertility issue and is trying to get pregnant and is having a challenge. We may speed that gene up, right? So the way we deal with supplementation is very much about genetic expression management. So true root cause. It's not the symptom, it's beyond the system, it's the actual genes themselves. And I would urge you to go through and just look at what's there to understand how this sort of suite of formulations really resolves most problems if you understand how to put the puzzle pieces together, right? So Laura's saying, do you identify corn-derived ingredients in all of your products, including processing, packaging, and spend a fortune on products? Yeah, so us specifically, we're very careful about ingredient sourcing and packaging, etc. From our team, one of the founders, Bryce, actually has traveled the world to go to the facilities where the ingredients come from. So he's gone to Japan, Malaysia, India, China, and seen the actual locations where we buy the ingredients from. So we're very careful about that. We're not using, histamine driving fillers that a lot of these companies do, for example. So yeah, we're very, very careful about that. Brain neurotropic neurofactors. So BDNF, I'm going to type it out for you, stands for, I'm not sure if that was your question, but brain derived neurotropic factor, right? I'm not sure if that's what you were getting to, but that's what BDNF is. And it speaks to neuroplasticity and it speaks to mood in a way of being able to manage your mood better, not having the drama queen responses, we call it, not crying over spilt milk, right? Okay, so are your supplements sold in Europe? They can be shipped globally. The only thing I would suggest, Ingrid, is that if you're buying in Europe, just buy in quantity because of the shipping cost. So as opposed to buying a bottle every month, maybe buy 4 or 5 bottles, so that you have a few months supply. Just considering shipping costs. They're shipped out of the US and Canada. So it's not a crazy huge problem, but you're definitely going to pay more for shipping than somebody who's local. So just buy multiple bottles so that you're mitigating that cost, right? Okay. So it looks like we've answered all the questions. Any other last thoughts? I want to make sure that we respect your time also. Yeah, so we have fulfillment in the US, Laura. So the majority of the work we actually do is in the US. Unfortunately, it's, we have the wealthiest wealthiest civilization we've ever seen is also probably the sickest. Yes, people are living longer, but they're not living in good health. And so that's been our focus because that's where sickness is. That's who needs the most help. So that's where we are. The special offer, that's a very good question. So what we wanted to make sure we offered you, so from what you listened to today, if you agree that personalization will save you a lot of time and money, save you a lot of heartache, right? And allow you to get through this journey easier, then what we're offering you today is just a straightforward, simple thing. Don't go to the website and buy the test for retail. We're going to give you a discount for joining us here today. So we're going to put that into the chat. But if you type the DNAcompany.com/inflammaging, it's right there. You'll get an automatic discount at checkout. So once you get to checkout, you'll see a discount. We'll also prioritize you guys because we understand that anyone that was attending the summit typically is more in tune with their health and potentially has more needs. So if you need someone to speak to you about, our coaching programs or how we can work with you on dealing with, for example, a specific condition that you're trying to unravel and unpack, you may go beyond the testing. And so we'll go ahead and email us about that. We'll put our client care email in here. If it's like, yeah, I understand the testing, but I want help. I want someone to guide me through this process. Email our client care support team. They're aware of this event tonight, and we will make sure that we get an intake coach, somebody who has experience figuring out how best to support you, right? So yeah, so use the DNAcompany.com/inflammaging. It's a site-wide discount, so if you decide you want supplements, etc., go for it. But really the intention is to offer you some value on the test up front, so that it's easier for you to deal with. And then as you get it, you're going to find that your eyes open in terms of all of what we discussed, what the priority should be. What do I focus on? Right? What's my why? If I could do one thing, eliminate all the noise, there's 40 interviews. Which interview was I supposed to watch? Imagine if it could be that. Here's the 7-day Inflammaging Summit. If a genie could wave a wand, and I know genies don't use wands, right? But if somebody waved a wand and pointed to the exact interview that you needed to watch, that's the one for you that's going to solve your problems. That's what your genetic report is going to do for you. It's going to say, here's why you feel this way, or here's not, if you're not yet sick, here's the thing that's going to cause you to feel that way if you don't prioritize it. That's all we're trying to do, right? We're trying to help you prioritize and focus. Do we have a recording? Yes, you can get a recording. B, correct me if I'm wrong, but we're going to send everyone a replay. And sorry, there's another question here. Oh, thank you. Yes, you're welcome, Kate. So let me know if that's correct, but I believe that we're going to send a replay out to everybody. You can dive into this a little more. You may already have a genetic report, in which case you can just use this information to mine that report for the context of inflammation, right? If you don't yet have it, you can use this, send it to your doctor, send it anywhere, forward to friends and family that you think may need the support. But ultimately, you know, our belief is that we see a lot of struggle. We do run a clinic. We do have coaches. We have medical doctors, all the way to health coach, to naturopaths, to personal trainers, everything. And the constant struggle that we see, the people that come to us is because they're stuck. Like, I've tried everything. And we hate to hear that, because why did you try everything? Why didn't you just try the thing you needed? Because you didn't know that that was possible, right? So that's what we're here to say, is that you can really, truly start on day one with the exact path that you need to start on, and not have those hiccups, not have those failures, feel great very quickly, save a lot of money, get to the goal quicker, right? Time is really important, because you don't want to be in this state. And if you're not yet sick, let's stretch out the way you feel today, that youth and vibrancy, let's continue that for longer, right? Let's not be like mom or grandma who got sick at 65 or 60. Let's take it to our 90s, right? Let's take it, if mom lived to 90, let's take it to 110. And let's be riding our bicycle at 110. So there's two outcomes here. It's like, let's unravel and unpack, because I know exactly where my body's failing and I'm going to support that. Let's also extend. Let me take the way I felt when I was 25 years old and carry that forward for much longer than I thought I was going to. Because if I'm not aging, if I'm not inflamed, if the cells are vibrant, there's no reason why I should feel old as I age. Age is a number, but it doesn't have to be a feeling, right? You can feel the way you want to feel if you take your time. So, Luciana, I believe you can order in Brazil. We do have clients there. If you have a challenge, if this website doesn't allow you, then just email client care. Okay, you did. Okay. You need me in Brazil. I've been there, by the way. I've been to Rio, and I went to a city called Buzios, I think, which is kind of like the cottage country for the Rio people. And I went to a doctor's house. There's a doctor who I was working with there, and he had a mango tree growing in the middle of his house, and it was honestly the most delicious mango I've ever had. It was like somebody took butter and mango and put them together in the perfect proportions. I don't know how else to describe it. Okay, do you have a clickable blue link for our clinic? I have a damaged arm to fall. Thank you for today. Do you have a a clickable link? Perhaps Caroline, do you want us to connect with you over email? We should have your email because you're on our email list. We will send you that, right? So Caroline, so let's just take a note, guys, here. Caroline Bazin, I hope I'm pronouncing that properly. We should have your email. Was it your email that was sent to under your name? If not, please give us your email, or email client care and we can send you all the links, right? I understand you're having a challenge copying and pasting. Okay, so we'll do that. So there you go, guys. That was the message we had to share with you tonight, which is you invested this time, you understood the value of learning about inflammation and why it drives aging and disease. We have something very specific we say that we believe you needed to know about it, which should be the starting point. right? Should be the starting point, because we see too many journeys that are bumpy and off, and then people give up, like, this stuff doesn't even work. Oh, this guy, it sounded so good, and then I went and did it, it didn't work for me. Well, it does work, it just doesn't work for you, right? You need to know what works for you. So that's the journey we want to set you off on, is day one. It's the right journey, exactly where the direction you need to be headed in, and you start to feel good really quick, right? We had an event last night for our internal customers to teach them about disease, and there was a lady that commented that she was diabetic, and she's no longer diabetic because she learned the exact habits. She was sorry, I should be very specific, pre-diabetic, about to become diabetic, so she was metabolically unhealthy, didn't know what to do. She was doing all the regular stuff that should have worked, but it didn't work. Then she found exactly a couple red flags that were outside of her awareness, and she's no longer pre-diabetic. It's only been weeks, by the way. We're not talking about a 6-month journey. It's weeks that this happened in, right? So there you go, guys. So thank you for joining us tonight. Yes, you'll get a replay. Caroline, we will work with you specifically. I understand the challenge there. We'll get you that information. Take advantage of the offer so that you're not paying retail. Don't go to the website and buy. Use this link, the /Inflammaging. So the dnacompany.com/Inflammaging. So make sure you get your discount. And then if you need help with coaching, if you need a deeper dive, connect with us. We will prioritize this community because we understand the need is greater here. That's why you're spending so much time and resources on this. That your health is your hobby, right? So thank you again for attending. Good night. This evening, guys. Good night. And anything else you need, we're here to support.
Your genetics are a phenomenal thing. A 40-year-old person who looks and feels like they're 28 isn't because they left things to chance. They're doing things differently. Chronic disease, aging, poor performance. These are all the result of wrong choices. But how do you know what the right choices are for you? And what would be the impact if you always made the right choice? What if you can change the day you die? When you see those first wrinkles, those gray hairs, or a call from the doctor and they say, I need to see you, your test results are in. We've taken it for granted that this is meant to happen, that aging and disease are just a part of life. Well, what if they're not? You can't feel cancer coming. There's no warning that dementia's on the way, and so we think these things just happen. We get sick, we try to treat it, but it's too late. Well, now, there's a better way. A way that puts us each in charge of our own destiny. Genetic research has advanced more in the last 3 years than the last 30. And this personal instruction manual that's in each one of us has finally been properly decoded. We can now get ahead of disease or even reverse it, allowing us to decide how we age. Our scientists have clinically studied over 5,000 people. We've sat in front of each and every one of them. We looked at their hair, their skin, their mood and behavior, their medical history, everything about them, all overlaid on their DNA map. We then understood where the biochemistry of your trillions of cells and the instructions of your 22,000 genes intersect. And with that, what choices each one of us needs to make to slow down aging and catch disease before it happens. I have no doubt that with the genetic insights we're seeing today, chronic disease will soon be a story that we tell our grandchildren. If you understand why chronic disease and aging really happen, you also understand that they are truly optional.